and the world of martial arts. And for people who are not aware of your background, you started out, correct me if I'm wrong, you started out a philosophy student.
That's correct, yes.
And you were working as a bouncer. And you were jacked, right? You were a power lifter at the time?
Yes.
And you wanted to figure out a way to defend yourself.
It wasn't really a question of wanting to figure out. It was a pretty simple desire that I had. When I grew up in New Zealand, martial arts was almost entirely based around striking prowess. You'll back me up on this, Joe. We're similar age. When we grew up, it's no exaggeration to say that the study of martial arts in English-speaking countries, North America, Western Europe, etc., was absolutely dominated by the striking arts. And if you ask the average person who was the best fighter in the world, they would typically say whoever was the best boxer in the world. So in the 1980s, Mike Tyson wasn't just the best boxer in the world, he was the best fighter in the world. People always equated prowess in fighting with the ability to strike. I grew up in that time period, and so I grew up doing studying kickboxing as a teenager in New Zealand. I came to the United States, and for the first time, there's no wrestling culture in my country. New Zealand has no wrestling culture. It's one of the few countries where there's no indigenous wrestling culture. There were, but it was kind of lost in the sands of time. When I grew up, wrestling was something I saw once every 4 years at the Olympics on TV. And I didn't even associate it with fighting, to be honest with you. I just saw it as these strange sport where two guys tackled each other. And so I came to the United States, and I was working as a bouncer. America has much, much more of a wrestling culture in it. In New Zealand, when I grew up, when you fought, you were expected to fight with fists, and if it went to the ground, the two guys stood up and they resumed fighting. You stood up and you fought like a man. That was the idea. And in the United States, when I was bouncing, I was absolutely shocked and impressed by the prowess of judo players and wrestlers in street fighting, working as a bouncer. I worked alongside them, and I was massively impressed.
What year was this?
This is in the early 1990s. I arrived in the United States in 1991. So I started working late 1991 in New York City. New York was a very, very, very different city back then. It's like it's almost like two different cities from what it used to be.
It is amazing how much it's changed,
The
right?
transformation is night and day.
It's become like a giant TGI Fridays now.
That's pretty much what New York City is, yeah. To give you an example, I used to live on West End Avenue on the Upper West Side. When I would come home from working in nightclubs at 5:30 in the morning to go to sleep, there would be large numbers of street-walking prostitutes on my block, my avenue. If you saw even a single street-walking prostitute in that area today, it would be front-page news of the New York Times. It would be so shocking, so completely out of people's... it would literally just warp people's minds.
Well, Times Square is the best example
Times
of that,
Square
right?
is an extreme example of
because Times Square used to be all seedy peep shows.
it was nothing but seedy peep shows.
And now it's like Guy Fieri restaurants. It's it's all weird television.
Yeah. So the transformation is huge. So that was the New York that I went into, and it was a violent New York. 1991, I believe, was the year with the highest murder rate in recorded history for New York City. So it was a very, very different New York City. It's not what you see today. So I came into this environment, and I saw these people were incredibly adept in fighting. They were using grappling technique to do so. This impressed me a lot. Shortly after that time, as I was working, I started to hear talk about this show, this Ultimate Fighting show. And there was this Brazilian guy who had beaten everyone. He was wrestling people and strangling them and locking their arms, things like this, things that I'd never heard of. So I'd heard this, and one day I was teaching at Columbia University, and a close friend of mine, who was also in the PhD program, came into my office. It was office hours, and he said, "John, I know you work as a bouncer, and I know you work at night, and I started doing this martial art. It's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's mostly fought on the ground. And I remember you said most of the fights you get into, people get put down on the ground and they wrestle. And I was wondering if you would be interested in doing it." And I was like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Yeah. I never associated martial arts with Brazil. For me, martial arts were, Japan, Korea,
Right.
Brazil, like, what do they got? Capoeira, Like,
Right.
who's this guy? So I'm like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Isn't Jiu-Jitsu like Japanese? Like, what is
Right.
it? Isn't it like
Confusing.
a contradiction of terms, like Brazil Jiu-Jitsu? So this, at the time, I was around 230 pounds, and this guy couldn't have been more than 140, and he'd only been training 2 weeks. So he goes to me, we go on the ground and we wrestle on the ground. And I was like, okay, let me put you in a headlock and let's see what you can do. So I shut the door of the office, I cleared out the furniture, and I put this poor kid on the ground. Now, I had, the only thing I knew how to do on the ground in those days was headlock people. And I was a strong guy, I had a pretty nasty headlock. And so I grabbed my poor little friend and throttled him with basically a Kesugatame type headlock. And to my shock and horror, he started slipping around behind me. And I started holding harder and harder, and about 2 minutes went by, and I really had no real control over him. And he was starting to get around behind me. Now, I didn't know back attacks were. I had complete naivety on the ground, but I could feel something bad was happening. Someone getting behind you is never a good thing in a fight. And I was getting tired. My arms were getting tired. I had no control over the guy. And finally, he slipped out, and I had to stand up and run away. I said, are you kidding me? I'm twice your size. You've been training 2 goddamn weeks, and if this was a real fight, he would have got away from it, and I'm tired. That's not good. And I was just like, if he did this in 2 weeks, what could you do with some training? So I was fascinated. I went down, got completely destroyed on my first day. It was hilarious. Who was there on this first day? Matt Serra was the most, he was a blue belt at the time. So even on that first day, you met people that would become very important in your life later on. And I vowed to the moon and the stars that I would at least become competent